143 quarterbacks were taken before him. 143 times an NFL front office looked at their board, looked at the list of reasons why Shedeur Sanders would fail, and moved on. Pick after pick after pick. The NFL collectively decided that the son of one of the most polarizing figures in football history came with too many unfixable problems, too many permanent flaws, too many things that just couldn't be coached away. And now, he's at Cleveland Browns OTAs in May 2026, in front of a brand new coaching staff that has zero emotional investment in any previous narrative, and he is systematically, methodically, almost surgically checking off every single item on that list, one rep at a time, one play at a time, right in front of cameras. This isn't a feel-good story about a kid getting a second chance. This is something far more uncomfortable for the people who built that list. Because when you watch the OTA footage frame by frame, the way Coach Lance Rawlston has, what you find isn't just improvement. What you find is evidence. Hard, time-stamped, undeniable evidence that the 5 things the NFL said Shedeur Sanders could never do, he is now doing. All of them. At the same time, without being asked to perform for anyone. So let's go through the list, every single item, and let's talk about what it means that it's now empty. Before we get into the OTA footage, you need to understand what the list actually was, because it wasn't just casual criticism. It was a coordinated, repeated, multi-sourced case built over months that argued Shedeur Sanders had permanent mechanical and mental deficiencies that made him an NFL risk. 5 specific things kept coming up across scouting reports, media analysis, and broadcast commentary, and together they formed the justification for one of the most stunning draft slides in recent memory. The first item on the list was that he couldn't read defenses. Critics argued his processing speed was too slow for the NFL level, that he held the ball too long because he couldn't quickly identify what the defense was doing and react accordingly. The second item was that he refused to check down. The argument was that Shedeur always wanted the spectacular play, always hunting for the big gain, never willing to take the safe, short, possession-keeping pass that keeps drives alive and protects the football. Third on the list was pocket drifting. Instead of stepping up into pressure and keeping his base under him, critics said he would drift laterally, losing his platform and creating bad angles on throws. Fourth, and maybe the most damaging statistically, was the sack problem. In the 2024 season at Colorado, Shedeur took 52 sacks, the most of any quarterback in the entire football bowl subdivision. 52. That number alone became a weapon used against him constantly. In fifth, critics said he couldn't attack the intermediate zone against zone coverage, that he shied away from the throws over linebackers that NFL offenses require constantly. 5 items, 5 permanent flaws in 143 picks worth of NFL decision-makers who apparently believed every single one of them. What makes this list especially brutal is how it was amplified. It wasn't just scouts in private rooms. It was broadcast, repeated, published, and used to shape public perception for months before the draft. By the time pick 144 came around, the list had taken on its own life. It wasn't just that teams had concerns. The narrative had calcified into something more definitive. Shedeur Sanders had problems that couldn't be fixed. That was the story. And 143 picks told you how widely that story had been believed. But here's the thing about stories built on scouting reports. They tend to fall apart the moment the player gets in front of coaches who haven't already decided what they're going to see. The first crack in the list showed up in red zone footage, and it's the kind of play that if you weren't paying close attention, you might have missed entirely. Because it's not flashy, it's not a highlight, it's exactly the opposite, and that's precisely why it matters so much. The play is timestamped from 2026 OTA footage, and what it shows is Shedeur Sanders in a red zone sequence, extending the play, working through his progressions, and finding Denzel Boston late. Not on the first read, not on the second, late in the progression, after keeping the play alive, after doing exactly what critics said he was constitutionally incapable of doing. He found the checkdown. He took the layup, he gave Boston the ball in a position to advance, and he did it with accuracy.
Coach Lance Ronslin broke this play down step by step, and his language is worth paying attention to because it's precise. He said Shedeur kept the play alive and targeted Boston well late in the progression. Then he said something even more pointed. He said, "This shows him taking the layup," which was the one thing he was told he would never do, taking what the defense gives. That phrase, taking what the defense gives, is essentially the entire philosophical opposite of the checkdown criticism. And Ronslin isn't saying Shedeur did something close to it or that he showed flashes of it. He's saying Shedeur did the exact thing critics said he would never do, and he did it cleanly. Item 1 on the list, the refusal to check down, had its first serious answer in that single red zone play. But the more significant thing is what that play tells you about the second item, because they're connected. The reason quarterbacks check down is that they trust their pocket, they trust their feet, they trust that they have time to work through reads because they're not panicking about pressure, which means if Shedeur is checking down, something has changed about the way he's navigating the pocket. That brings us to the sack number. 52 sacks in a single college season is not just a statistic, it's a physical and psychological experience that leaves marks. Shedeur himself acknowledged this. He said the experience is similar to post-traumatic stress disorder, that repeated punishment changes a quarterback's footwork in ways that are hard to undo, that once you've been hit enough times, your body starts making decisions before your mind catches up. Critics took that admission and ran with it. They called it conclusive proof that his pocket presence issues were baked in, that the PTSD of 52 sacks had permanently damaged his ability to stand tall and process under pressure. The OTA footage doesn't just challenge that narrative, it dismantles it. What the film shows is not a quarterback flinching, it shows fluid pocket movement, not lateral drifting, but purposeful stepping up, getting his base reset, and getting the ball out quickly. Coach Ronslin described it as working the pocket, not drifting through it, and highlighted how the subtle differences in his approach are allowing him to keep plays alive, rather than die under pressure. The drift that was supposed to be permanent is gone. The footwork that was supposed to be broken is being praised by coaches who have no reason to protect him. 2 items off the list in the same OTA session without anyone asking for a performance. The third item on the list was always the one that felt most like a football death sentence because it was about football intelligence at its most technical level. Reading zone coverage in attacking the intermediate field, specifically throwing over linebackers into the spaces that zone defenses try to take away, is one of the hardest things to learn in football. It requires anticipation, timing, the ability to see a window before it fully opens, and the courage to throw into tight spaces before your receiver has even finished his route. Critics said Shedeur didn't have it, that he shied away from those throws, that against zone coverage his instinct was to bail rather than to attack. Then came the dig route. In the red zone, with jet motion and play action working simultaneously, Shedeur Sanders hit Dillon Wallace on a dig route for a touchdown. On paper, that sounds straightforward. In practice, on that specific play, with that specific defensive look, it's anything but. The play action required him to swing his eyes from left to right, resetting his entire field of vision in real time before finding the dig opening. Coach Ronslin praised his footwork and focus through the entire sequence and made a point of highlighting that this wasn't accidental. Shedeur navigated the jet motion, handled the play action, and then delivered the ball to a receiver running across a linebacker's zone, which is the exact window critics said he wouldn't throw into. There's a moment in the analysis where the speaker jokes that Shedeur wants a better nickname than Johnny Dig, saying Shedeur loves hitting this route and thriving in the middle of the field. But underneath the humor is something genuinely significant, because what's being described isn't a quarterback who tolerates the intermediate zone. It's a quarterback who's comfortable in it, who seeks it out, who has the anticipation and confidence to throw over linebackers with the play still developing. That's not a corrected flaw, that's a strength. The third supposedly permanent weakness has not just been answered, it's been flipped. And what makes this even striking is the context in which it happened. A new coaching staff, no preconceived narrative to protect, no reason to frame what they're seeing in a generous light. These are coaches evaluating a competition, and what they're seeing from Shedeur Sanders in the intermediate zone is impressing them. That's not spin, that's the most credible possible source of information about whether a player has actually improved.
But the critics who built the list weren't just talking about mechanics. They were talking about processing speed, about whether Shedeur's brain worked fast enough at the NFL level to make quick decisions with real defenders in real coverage. And for that, the OTA footage produced something almost uncomfortably specific, a real-time progression clock breakdown that put the entire processing speed argument to rest in about 3 seconds. Literally 3 seconds. That's how long the play takes. The analysis panel timed it live. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. At the top of his drop, Shedeur's eyes are on the middle of the field. He scans left, identifies that his initial read isn't there, breaks off that target, finds Taylon Wallace in open space, and delivers the ball into a tight window with 2 defenders in front and 1 behind, before Wallace has even completed the catch. The throw was placed where only his receiver could make a play on it. That phrase comes from the analysis panel, and it's the exact language used to describe elite anticipatory throwing, not reactive throwing, not checkdown throwing, but the kind of throw that tells you a quarterback saw the whole field and made a decision before the defense could close the window. Coach Roz Len called it a direct answer to the one technical critique that appears in every NFL scouting report: too long with the ball, not taking available yards, slow processor. 3 seconds, 1 play, and that entire column of the scouting report is now a question mark at best. Cleveland Browns offensive coordinator Travis Switzer added his voice to this when he confirmed publicly that Shedeur has made big strides, saying they're happy with both of their development and that all the guys are doing a good job. Here's why the Switzer quote matters beyond its surface meaning. Offensive coordinators in May do not volunteer specific praise for quarterbacks unless they mean it. There's no upside to overstating a backup's development during OTAs. Switzer had nothing to gain from saying Shedeur has made big strides unless Shedeur has actually made big strides. That's not a media management quote. That's a football evaluation. 4 items off the list. The only thing left was the accuracy debate, and for that, the numbers were already waiting. The accuracy criticism was always the strangest part of the list because it ran directly into a wall of statistics that most people making the argument seemed determined to ignore. Shedeur Sanders holds the all-time FBS completion percentage record at 71.8%. That's not a conference record. That's not a single season record. That's the best completion percentage in the entire history of college football at the top level. And Drew Brees, who retired as arguably the most accurate quarterback in NFL history, finished his career at 67.7%. Shedeur's college number is better than Drew Brees' career NFL number. Critics acknowledged the statistic and then dismissed it, arguing that college accuracy doesn't translate, that his 10 interceptions in 7 NFL starts proved his decision-making broke down at the professional level. But here is what was consistently left out of that argument. The offensive line protecting Shedeur Sanders last season was, in the words of one of his most prominent critics, held together with smoke and mirrors. Those 10 interceptions didn't happen behind a functional, healthy offensive line. They happened behind a patchwork unit that was collapsing around a rookie quarterback in his first 7 starts who had never thrown to most of those receivers before. When you put that context around the interception number, the entire accuracy argument starts to look less like a legitimate evaluation and more like a conclusion in search of supporting evidence. At his pro day before the 2025 draft, Shedeur answered the accuracy doubters as directly as anyone could. He completed 62 of 67 passes, then threw a 55-yard deep ball to Jimmy Horn Jr. in front of NFL scouts. When asked about his footwork afterward, his response was simple: "You know who my dad is. They hated on him too." That answer told you everything about how he was processing the criticism. Not defensively, not with bitterness, with the calm of someone who expected to be doubted and planned to perform anyway. The accuracy was never the problem. The situation around the accuracy was the problem.
And now, in a new situation, with new coaches and real reps and a legitimate opportunity to compete, the completion percentage record holder is showing up and making the throws. In any sports story, the moment you know the narrative has genuinely shifted is not when the player's performance changes, it's when the people who built the critical narrative start changing their language. And in the case of Shedeur Sanders, that moment arrived publicly, loudly, and in a way that was almost impossible to miss.
Mary Kay Cabot spent months as one of the most consistent voices questioning Shedeur's future in Cleveland. She covered the situation with a skepticism that was visible and repeated. She was part of the media environment that amplified the 5-item list. And then, on 92.3 The Fan, live on radio, she said something that the analysis panel immediately labeled a complete reversal. She called Shedeur a gamer. She said he plays with instincts, that when the game is on and he needs to march downfield in a 2-minute situation, he gets in his zone and lets his natural abilities take over. And then she said the line was held together with smoke and mirrors, which is the single most important contextual statement anyone in Cleveland media has made about his rookie season, because it directly addresses the interception narrative by acknowledging what was happening around him. That is not a mild softening of a previous position. That is a reporter who spent months building a critical case, now dismantling the foundation of her own argument in public. The analysis panel called it a glaze, their term for the most significant media shift of the entire 2026 NFL offseason, and they're not wrong. When the reporter who questioned whether his father's health was affecting his performance, who spent months centering the conversation around everything Shedeur couldn't do, is now on live radio calling him a gamer with natural instincts, something fundamental has changed in how this story is being told. Tony Grossi, another well-known Cleveland media voice who had been consistently critical, admitted on air that Shedeur looked more polished working with the veteran players than he did during rookie camp. That's not a compliment about raw athleticism, that's a football observation about refinement, about a player who has studied the game and internalized what he's been taught. And then there's the voice the analysis panel calls Big RZ, who said Shedeur is 1,000% better than he was at this same point last year. 1,000%? That's not a careful, hedged media statement. That's someone who watched him last year and is watching him now and cannot reconcile the two versions of the same player. 3 separate critical voices, 3 public reversals, all within the same OTA window. That's not coincidence. That's what happens when the evidence becomes impossible to argue with. So here's where everything lands. Here's what the complete picture looks like when you put every piece together. Shedeur Sanders was taken at pick 144 because 143 picks worth of NFL decision-makers believed a 5-item list. That list said he couldn't read defenses, wouldn't check down, drifted in the pocket, had sack-induced footwork damage that couldn't be undone, and avoided the intermediate zone against zone coverage. Every item on that list has now been answered, not theoretically, not with projections or potential, with time-stamped OTA footage analyzed frame by coaches who have no investment in the outcome, in front of a new coordinator who confirmed the development publicly, validated by the same media voices who spent months building the original case against him. The completion percentage record that was dismissed as a college stat is now sitting next to Drew Brees' career number, looking increasingly relevant. The 10 interceptions that were used as proof of broken decision-making are now sitting inside the context of a smoke and mirrors offensive line that even his harshest critic has acknowledged publicly. The PTSD pocket narrative is being replaced by footage of fluid, purposeful movement and praised footwork from impartial coaches. The list that buried him in the draft is now functionally empty. And here's the question that every NFL team that passed on him 143 times now has to sit with. Not whether he's improved, because that's been confirmed by multiple independent sources. The real question is whether the list was ever actually about football, because when you look at how it was constructed, how widely it was amplified, how consistently the statistical context was ignored, and how quickly the same voices are now reversing their positions the moment they watch him in front of new coaches, the list starts to look less like a scouting evaluation and more like a narrative that was decided before the evidence was fully examined.
Shedeur Sanders showed up at Cleveland Browns OTAs in May 2026 and checked off every item on that list, one rep at a time, with no one asking him to perform and no agenda to protect. The coaching staff saw it, the coordinator confirmed it, the media voices reversed themselves, the footage exists, the timestamps are real, and 143 NFL teams are watching a quarterback they passed on systematically dismantle the exact case they used to justify passing on him. The impossible list is empty. Every single item on it is gone, and the only thing left to figure out is what the people who built that list are going to do with the blank space where their certainty used to be. Let us know in the comments which item on that list surprises you most to see completely answered, and whether you think Shedeur Sanders ends up starting in Cleveland before the season is over.